After a funeral, most families return home. But in Kota Belud, a coastal district in Sabah, Malaysia, at the northern tip of Borneo, some families stay behind. They put up a canopy beside the new grave and stay there through the night, and the night after that, for 7 nights running. They are not there to grieve. They are there to guard something. The people who keep this watch call the thing they are guarding against the Balan-balan. Kota Belud sits on the west coast of Sabah, the Malaysian state that covers part of the island of Borneo, a little over an hour's drive north of Kota Kinabalu, the state capital, where rice fields run down from the hills to meet the South China Sea. The main road strings together small towns and weekly markets. Beyond them, houses stand apart from each other, joined by narrow tracks, drainage ditches, and the lights of family compounds. Bajau, Iranon, Ubian, and Dusun communities share the district, and in daylight it looks like anywhere doing ordinary work. School runs, fishing boats, motorbikes carrying market goods. At night the distances change. A single lamp outside a shop lights a pole and a few feet of road, and beyond that the fields take the dark back. It is an ordinary place. It also has a reputation, among people who live there, for being a place where the ordinary rules of a house and a body do not always hold after dark. Among some families in Kota Belud, burial is not where the watching ends. For 7 nights after someone is buried, relatives take turns staying at the grave under a simple shelter. They talk, they eat when they can, some read from the Quran, and someone stays awake through each night. It is not treated as unusual by the people who do it. It is a duty owed to whoever has just died. There are 2 stated reasons for keeping the watch. The first is practical in the plainest sense. Leave a fresh grave unwatched, and it may be dug up. The second reaches further. An unguarded grave, so soon after death, is also an opportunity for anyone practicing black magic nearby, and the family's presence is what keeps that door closed. Both reasons assume the same thing. A body freshly in the ground is not yet settled, and something can still be done to it, or with it, if no one is there to stop that happening. Azrul Samsu grew up in Iranon in Kota Belud, and has kept this watch many times. In 2023, after his aunt died, he described the tradition to a national outlet, explaining that his family had followed it for years and no longer found it strange. He also described a night from years earlier, when his grandmother died in 2005, and the family took their places beside her grave as they always did. The ground beyond the shelter was uneven, older graves stood nearby in the dark, and the small group who had stayed after the funeral had only the light they had brought with them. At some point that night, the people keeping watch looked up. Something was moving above the graves. It was not a person walking between them. Whatever it was in the air. Azrul described what they saw as a head with the intestines trailing beneath it, moving above the burial ground with no body attached to either. The watchers called for the older relatives. The elders came and recited verses over the grave, and the shape went. The shelter, the grave, and the small group of people beneath it were exactly as they had been a few minutes before. What had changed was what the family now believed they were guarding against. In Sabah, that shape has a name. People call it the Balan-balan. Many won't say the word outright. Instead they say Bikuasa dua, B to the power of 2, repeating the sound rather than the name, because the belief is that saying it draws the thing closer. For the family at that grave, the vigil had always had a purpose. After that night, it had a name to go with it. In local belief, the Balan-balan is not a wandering spirit with no history. By day, it is said to be an ordinary person, most often a woman, who has taken up a kind of black magic. At night, her head separates from her body and travels through the air with her lungs, stomach and intestines still attached beneath it. It goes toward blood, and the tradition names what it prefers: women who are pregnant, women newly delivered, and infants. It is also said to move through walls and rise up through the cracks in a floor, so that a house's ordinary boundaries, a door, a wall, a raised floor, offer it none of the resistance they would offer a person. That is the shape the family at the grave believed had crossed their vigil. Not a stranger walking in from outside, but something that had once been, and by day still was, someone's neighbor. Not every account of the Balan-balan comes from a grave. One story, told and retold across Sabah for years, takes place on an ordinary road at night, and nobody telling it claims to know the family's name. A man was driving home with his wife and young son after visiting relatives. It was a route they knew well, dim in stretches, with a shop or two, and then long dark distance between compounds, the kind of road where a car's headlights are the only light for whole minutes at a time. Passing one of the shops, the boy noticed something circling a lamppost nearby, low, close to the bulb. From inside the moving car it looked, for a moment, like nothing more than a large bird caught in the light. He asked his mother what it was. The car went on past the shop. For a moment, nothing followed, and the ordinary dark of the road closed back in behind them. Then the shape left the lamppost behind and came after them, gaining on the car rather than falling away from it. It kept pace with the car for several kilometers. The boy began to cry. His mother, who had thought at first that it might be a bird catching the light, could see enough now to know it was not behaving like one. The driver pressed the accelerator down. There was no town ahead to run to, no row of lit windows, only the same dark road repeating itself past the windscreen. The shape did not fall back. It did not lose them when the road bent. The driver began reciting verses aloud, expecting the words to put distance between the car and whatever was behind it. Instead, the thing outside grew more insistent. It came in closer to the car rather than further away, as though the recitation itself had drawn its attention rather than turned it aside. It came level with the car and held there, beside the driver's side window. For a stretch of road neither he nor his wife could afterward put a number to. It stayed at the glass, watching the people inside. He did not turn to look at it directly. He kept his eyes on the road and kept driving, while beside him his wife and son could see the shape without needing to turn at all. Then a second car appeared, coming the other way. As it passed, its driver sounded the horn, whether as a greeting, a warning, or because he too had seen something beside the road. No one in the first car could say. The shape left the window. It turned from their car and went after the one that had just passed them, back the way it had come, and did not return. The family kept driving. The driver later took 2 weeks away from work before he felt able to go back to it. The oldest written descriptions of what a household does about the Balan-balan, under its older peninsula name of Penanggalan, come from childbirth rather than a grave or a road. Birth in these accounts happened on the floor of a family home, in a room emptied for the purpose and returned to the bidan, the village midwife, for as long as the labor lasted. Her authority in that room was not ceremonial. She decided how the birth was managed and how what followed it was disposed of, and the household did as she said, because the room she was managing was genuinely dangerous. Complications in childbirth, in the period these accounts come from, killed women often enough that every precaution in the room had a reason behind it, whether or not that reason was ever explained aloud. The house itself, in this tradition, was built raised on posts above open ground, floorboards laid over a dark space that ran the width of the building. That gap beneath the floor was not treated as empty. Some of the household's precautions had nothing to do with delivering the child. Thorny leaves were hung at the door of the birth room and at its windows. More were laid beneath the floor itself, in the open space between the posts. Wherever there was an opening a body could not use but something else might, the household put thorns across it. None of this behaved like an ordinary defense. A door with thorns across it does nothing against an animal that a shudder would stop more easily, and nothing at all against a difficult labor or a fever. What it assumed was something that did not need the door to be open, only for a way through of any kind to exist. A gap under a floorboard, a crack at a window frame, a space between one post and the next. The household was not keeping something out. It was arming every point where something might come in. Set beside the creature's shape, the thorns stop looking superstitious and start looking deliberate. A head can steer. It can angle itself through a narrow gap, judge a doorway, thread a window frame. What hangs beneath it cannot. The organs trail a moment behind and below, following wherever the head is already gone, and they cannot be drawn in tight or lifted clear the way a body can duck through a low doorway. So a household did not need to seal an opening completely. It only needed to line that opening with something a head could pass, but a length of trailing viscera could not clear without catching. The plant most often named for this in the older written tradition is called jaruju. What made it useful was never its species. It was simply thorned and placed exactly where the gap was. The fullest of the old written accounts survives because a Malay writer set it down for a European who asked him about it. Abdullah bin Abdul Qadir worked as a translator and teacher between Malacca and Singapore in the first half of the 1800s, and he wrote a record of his own times that was later published in Singapore in 1849. Somewhere in that period, an acquaintance asked him to explain what the penanggalan was. Abdullah answered, and then drew it, a woman's head and neck, with the intestines hanging beneath. The drawing was cut into a printing block by hand, line by line, and set into the page beside the story it illustrated. Once it was in print, it stopped belonging to the man who told it. Anyone who opened that page, in a house half a world from the one the story came from, now knew what to picture if they ever saw a head moving alone through the dark. What Abdullah set down was specific in a way that reads like instruction rather than legend. A woman could gain this ability through a kind of destructive magic. Her head and neck came loose from her body and lifted away, carrying the intestines with them. The body itself stayed exactly where she left it, in whatever room she had been sitting in a moment before, waiting for her to come back. One story preserved in that same written tradition describes what happened when the thorns actually worked, rather than simply standing ready. The visit came at midnight, low, along the line of a hedge marking the edge of a household's ground. The head cleared the branches, the way it had cleared doorways and window frames on other nights. The organs trailing beneath did not. They caught and held, and the harder the creature pulled against the branches, the deeper the thorns worked into what they had snagged. There was nothing left to do but stay suspended there, through the rest of the night, through the last dark hour before dawn, through the point where the sky over the rooftops stopped being black and started to gray. At first light, the household came out to the hedge and found the shape still hanging, fixed in place by its own weight. They killed it where it hung. That story is usually told as though the thing caught in the hedge was the whole of the danger. It was not. If a penanggalan's head can travel while her body stays behind, then on the night something is caught in a hedge, there are two places at once. There is the hedge with the head fixed in the thorns until morning. And somewhere else, within flying distance, there is a room with a woman's body lying in it, whole from the neck down, breathing, waiting to be whole again. That room could be anywhere within reach of the hedge that night, a house down the same lane, a room behind a shop front, a bed in a house where a family was already asleep. The people who found the shape in the hedge at dawn had killed only the part of it that flew. Somewhere close by, before the sun was fully up, a body that no one had thought to look at twice was still lying in the dark, and whoever shared that house with her had no way of knowing what had just stopped coming home. The return to the body was never automatic, and this is where the tradition turns procedural. Once the organs had been outside the body for any length of time, they were said to swell, so that they no longer fit back through the neck the way they had come out. Before she could rejoin herself, a woman had to shrink them, and the substance kept for that purpose was vinegar, held ready in an ordinary jar somewhere in the house. That single detail changes what the household with the thorns was actually up against. The visit was never open-ended. It had a deadline set by the sunrise. Because somewhere close by, a body was waiting to be found intact and whole before daylight reached the room it was lying in. It is also why the hedge worked as well as it did. The thorns were never going to kill the thing outright. They only had to hold it past dawn. Every one of these encounters happened in its own place, in its own year, to people who never met each other and never compared what they had seen. A grave in Kota Belud in 2005, a car on a dark road years later, carrying a family who never learned what they had passed on the way home. A hedge on a household's boundary, one night long past. What crossed all three was the same shape, a head alone in the dark, moving toward blood, with somewhere it needed to be before the sun came up. That last part is the one worth sitting with. Whatever was caught in that hedge, whatever crossed that grave, whatever kept pace with that car by daylight, it was someone. Somewhere close to wherever it had spent the night, a woman was getting up, getting dressed, going about an ordinary day as if nothing in her house had moved after dark. The people around her would have no reason to look twice. They never do, until something forces them to. Tonight, in Kota Belud, there may be a family sitting beside a grave that is only a few days old, under a canopy, taking turns to stay awake. They are not there because they expect to see anything. Most nights, by their own account, nothing happens at all. They are there because a grave left alone can be dug up, and because 7 nights is the length of time a family in that tradition is willing to stand between the dead and whatever might still want something from them. If the old accounts are right about what else is out there, the thing they are guarding against was never only a shape above a grave or a shadow beside a car window. It was a head that has to find its way back to a body before morning, a body that by daylight gets up and gets dressed and is greeted by name. For more true stories and chilling encounters, subscribe to Stories After Dark. We will be here when you return. Until next time.